Welcome back. This is Boomer Life on CL 650.
Welcome back to the program. The doctor is in on this edition of Boomer Life. The doctor is Philippe Silvestre. He is the founder and president of Neurokinetics Clinic in Vancouver. And he brought J.C. Gordon, director of liaison and logistics, and Sonia Dale, the clinic manager, along to this edition of the program as well. We just heard from Alex, the mountain bike rider, a very athletic young guy who came to see you a couple of years ago, Dr. Philippe, based on a concussion. He had been receiving some treatment in another province. He was dissatisfied with his progress. So when he moved back to BC to take his new gig up in Whistler, he found you in a Google search. That's how hard neurokinetics is to find. And he popped it by the shop. And I assume, Sonia, went through the standard 3 assessment visits as everyone else does, right?
Yes, he did. Yes.
Okay. So once you determined and had seen Alex for those 3 visits, Dr. Philippe, you designed a program for him, which he's still participating in. What did you do for him?
So we applied a structure which is adequate to a given patient. We have commonalities, we have also specifics to handle a particular case. So the commonalities is we basically blend Western medical knowledge with the tools and techniques available from Eastern medicine.
Right.
I am not a licensed medical doctor here in the province, but this is only due to politics. I am only licensed as an acupuncturist, which is already a little hanging on which allow me to provide my expertise.
But you used some acupuncture strategies with Alex, didn't you?
Yes, we do. As always, as we always do.
And he talked also about some kind of insole. So you gave him, again, once the assessment was over, you were able to identify a physical area that needed some attention as well.
Okay, and when we speak about insoles, it is not about correcting a foot, which is outside of my scope of practice.
Right, sure. You're not a podiatrist.
I'm not a podiatrist.
Right, yeah.
What is in insole is a way to stimulate energetics according to Eastern medicine and also the nervous system. Subsequently, that is an overlap in the light of brain performance and brain physiology.
Okay.
And it's called biomedicine, it belongs to what is called as a medical field biomedicine and functional medicine, which is bridging Eastern medicine and Western medicine. And it is an emerging domain over the past 10 years, very, very strongly worldwide. So what is in an insole is basically a tool, a device, which is called a biophotonic device, and is basically a device which interferes with quantum emission or emission of photon, which is emitted from the body. It is a physical phenomenon which is now extremely well known and understood that relates to brain performance and brain regulation.
Well, isn't that fun, JC, that you can put an insole in somebody's shoe and have it directly affect their brain and that whole optimization you were talking about earlier?
Absolutely, and again, that's one of our specialties, is to optimize the brain. And as Alex mentioned, it wasn't until he came back to see us after his second concussion that we added the BRE device. And for Alex, his performance allowed him to actually be on the podium for the very first time.
And we began this program talking about performance enhancement and restoration, which we actually now have learned that it should be performance restoration and then enhancement. But in Alex's case, that's what happened. He had his performance capacities restored and used them to max and won something.
Yes. It's so rewarding, Sterling, to hear the stories of our patients as they reach their levels of potential, because we all have potential, and that potential can be realized when the brain is optimized, dysfunction is eliminated, and the brain is functioning properly.
I think, Dr. Philippe, too, and I know I'm repeating myself here, but I think in terms of this episode of Boomer Life containing a really important lesson for anyone listening, it's Alex's story in terms of his concussion. And he's a young guy who's got a lot of athletic years and a lot of hills to pound down on that snowboard, to say nothing of that mountain bike. But he's got to be careful, because one concussion opens the door to an even smaller injury, an event creating still even larger problems. Talk to us about the importance of concussion health once you've experienced one.
Well, in matter of concussion, prevention is everything, and prevention will start with checking the brain functional state if there has been in the past a history of concussion, even mild. Because when our brain gets unset or shattered and we become somehow even slightly dysfunctional, the cognitive processing is altered.
Right.
And remember, this cognitive processing is comparable to the software in your computer.
Right, and Alex called it just being off his game. Nothing was working anymore properly.
And losing the edge.
Right.
Losing that tune, which makes the performance optimum or not, and effective. So when we get in that stage, which is an altered stage, we become the worst. We get into the worst place to become our own evaluator and judge.
Yes.
Because our screening process is itself altered. How can you evaluate and gauge something
while you're
with
also
the wrong
developing
compass?
A coping strategy?
And you cannot
can't
evaluate. You
can't
lost
do
your
those
gauge.
two things at once, can you?
You lost your gauge.
Right, exactly. Okay, so again, and JC, this again speaks to people who are hearing about neurokinetics perhaps for the very first time. And a great example with young Alex joining us, because here's a young guy, fit as a fiddle, but just took a few too many bumps. And now he's back out there. He's not going to stop. And now he's winning, and I'll bet you being a lot more careful in the process.
You know, it's a good lesson for anybody out there, any of our listeners that are out there, to know that there is hope.
Right.
That you don't have to live with how you're feeling now, that you can reach your optimum potential.
And that's what Alex said. He came back. He'd been receiving treatment elsewhere, and just it wasn't right. He didn't feel right. He was still suffering from post-concussion symptoms. He was just off his game. He'd lost his edge. So the folks at Neurokinetics just did it. It just put him right back, and as it turns out, on the podium for the very first time. Our thanks to Alex for joining us. And Sonia, JC, and Dr. Philippe, so much fun having you pop by on Boomer Life. Shall we do it again in about a month's time?
We shall.
All right, well, we'll see you then, and we'll see you next time right here on Boomer Life on CIL 650.